Hello there and welcome to the Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. I'm your host, Vidas Pinkevičius. Welcome to Secrets of Organ Playing podcast number 111. Today is Sunday, September 10, 2017. Today's guest is an American organist and harpsichordist, Dr. Kathleen Scheide. She has concertized as a harpsichord and organ soloist throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico, Europe, Russia, the Far East, and the Caribbean. She has received touring artist grants from the Arkansas Arts Council, California Arts Council, the American Embassies in Prague and Vienna, and the Czech Embassy in St. Petersburg. Dr. Scheide regularly performs chamber music with ensembles such as Le Meslange de Plaisirs and Voix seraphique on historic string keyboard instruments, and as Due Solisti, flute and organ with Czech flutist Zofie Volalkova. Scheide earned degrees in early music with honors in organ performance at New England Conservatory and the University of Southern California. Her teachers have included John Gibbons and Cherry Rhodes. She teaches harpsichord at Westminster Choir College of Rider University, Princeton, and teaches online and sometimes traditional classes for Rowan College at Burlington. She lives in a 17th century stone house, Wiggan, and plays organ in the 1740 stone barn at the Church of the Loving Shepherd, Bournelyf, Westchester. A founding member of various early keyboard societies, Dr. Scheide was recently elected to a second term on the executive committee of the Philadelphia chapter of American Guild of Organists. She's also a past dean of the San Diego chapter. Dr. Scheide is also a published composer with a significant discography. Her compositions have been made available through Darcy Press, E.C. Schirmer, Piano Press, Time Warner, Wayne Leopold, and World Library. Current commissions include a piece for the 10th anniversary of the Kimmel Center organ. Her recordings are available on Dutch HLM, Organ Historical Society, Palatine, and Raven labels. So in today's conversation, Dr. Scheide shares her insights about her experiences with pipe organ, including her fascinations with the Nazard stop at the beginning, Messiaen's The Ascension Cycle, and Peter Eben's Labyrinth, and also about the trumpet and organ experiences. At the end of this conversation, Dr. Scheide lists 3 steps in order to become a better organist. So make sure you listen to the very end, and this will be very inspiring conversation. Let's go to the show. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for joining this conversation. I'm really delighted that we're able to communicate across almost the globe, half the globe, and the technology works fine today, and we'll be sharing our experiences about pipe organ playing. Perhaps you can share the stories of how you overcome some challenges in your practices, maybe some things you currently are working on today, and things like that. Okay, thank you so much, Kathleen, one more time, and welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
So let's start, Kathleen, with this question that's very interesting for introduction. Do you remember the story when somebody introduced you to the organ, to the pipe organ world, maybe many years ago, and you really probably first fell in love with this? Could you share the story with us?
I heard organs in churches, and I loved the colors. And I particularly remember, although of course I didn't know the name of it, I always loved when I heard the Nazard sound. That really enraptured me. I played the piano as a child, but I maybe found it a little monochromatic. So when I began to study seriously, I studied harpsichord and then organ.
Okay. So how old were you when you first started to play harpsichord?
I went to college or conservatory, technically, as a harpsichord major, having never really played the harpsichord before. I went 2 weeks before my audition and coached my pieces with a harpsichord teacher, with Helen Keeney, and then I took my audition and began study. And then I was studying organ at the same time, sometimes privately. And then my graduate work was in organ.
Right. And you mentioned this Nazard stop, right? This
Yes.
maybe flute-based fifth, right? What it
Yes.
is. So it's a peculiar stop to be fascinated by, right, at the beginning.
Yes. It has a sort of hollow sound that I found very appealing. So there are certain things. Of course, I remember sitting and hearing the Nazard sound, but I also have strong memories often of the first time that I heard certain famous organ works, or the first time that I heard the work of Messiaen.
Uh-huh. Oh, and when did it happen? When you first heard the work of Messiaen, Olivier Messiaen?
I would say maybe 13 or 14, and I really didn't understand that I was hearing the work of a famous composer. I sort of felt that I had discovered him. I loved it.
Wonderful. Not so many young people know of Messiaen, right?
That's
we
true.
know this joke, Messiaen, right?
Yeah. At the time, certainly. Although now, sometimes, occasionally, I even think it sounds old-fashioned. And there was certainly a time when it was so radical, and still is to many listeners. And it depends on which piece, of course, as well.
What piece of Messiaen did you first hear?
It was the Ascension Suite.
Uh-huh. So that's a moderately modern piece, not too risky for the listener to hear, not too avant-garde, I would say.
Right.
What movement fascinated you the most back then?
I'm sorry, which? Which movement?
Which movement?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think I felt strongly attracted to all of them. Maybe not so much the final movement, but right from the beginning of the suite, it really drew me in. And then later, I was able to appreciate the final movement as well, which is not so showy.
What organ did you listen to it first? Was it a live recording, live performance, or?
It was a live performance. Yeah.
Was the room lively acoustics? Was the room with lively acoustics, or?
I'm thinking about that. It was at least reasonably lively, not totally dead. Looking back, I think it couldn't have been a great organ, but I didn't always know the difference.
Right. It's funny that sometimes Messiaen himself preferred rather dry acoustics over reverberant spaces. when the stops were available that he wanted, the Nazards, the tiers, the larigo, those high-pitched sounds, mutations, he loved those. But the room might have been very like dead acoustic, but he still.
Yes, and I have to say I don't necessarily mind always a dry acoustic, especially, of course, for practice. But I think it's interesting that, of course, Messiaen is known for unusual use of mutations and such stops, and these were also the stops that first fascinated me.
That's right. And probably in the second movement, right?
Yes.
You have those strange mutations, and flute in the pedals also with one foot stop
Right.
together. Interesting combinations. He was experimenting at the time already.
Right.
So, Kathleen, what was the first piece by Messiaen that you played in your life? Do you remember?
Oh, it was also the Ascension Suite.
Not surprisingly.
I think it was an assignment, though. It's not as though I developed a lifelong obsession with it. I think that's often that or something from Nativity is where people often begin.
Although these are not the easiest pieces to start with, like Le Banquet Céleste or Apparition of the Church, Eternal Church might be easier side.
Yes.
Technically.
Yes, although I think Messiaen is still not necessarily given to intermediate students.
True.
Yes.
Was it easy for you to master the Ascension Suite or not so much? Especially the second movement, let's say.
It was reasonably easy. It wasn't unusually difficult, I think. Yeah.
When I first played this suite, the second movement especially, I discovered those strange rhythmical tuplets combinations.
Yes.
Right, 3/4, 2/3. It's easy,
yes, right?
When you have to play 4/3, it's
oh yes, and I certainly remember working exactly on those rhythms. Yeah.
So what helped you to master those rhythmical combinations?
In that piece, I think it was really thoroughly learning each line separately, so that not only did I have it in my ear, but the muscle movement was absolutely automatic. I do also remember sitting down and figuring out the relationships and where notes would fall in what sequence, but I think the independent work was most important. And I think that's true for many rhythmic combinations, but not universally. Sometimes it's also good to understand the vertical relationships. They have to be locked in as well. The verticals have to cue off each other, certainly.
That's certainly true, Kathleen, because probably we have to imagine that like 3 instruments are playing or 3 people are performing at the same time, because there are 3 layers of music there, and each has its own rhythmical values, and sometimes they don't coincide. So as you're saying, we have to like separate each other from each other, separate each line, and then like automatically it will come together. Right.
Yes, and sometimes if everything is too perfectly vertically aligned, it can sound mechanical. So it is nice sometimes, even in an ensemble, if there's a little bit of independent shaping, as long as the instruments come together before too long, before the final cadence. But I think even when that happens in an organ trio or in keyboard music, if the hands separate a little bit in an expressive way, it can give the music more dimension.
True. You're talking about this specific combination in the second movement. A lot of people struggle with 3/4 and even 5/4, right?
Right.
It's even more tricky. So yes, it helps sometimes to imagine that you're like improvising, right?
Right.
Really very strict. Because when we listen to Messiaen's personal recordings of similar pieces, he is quite free with rhythms, right?
Right. This is true. This is surprisingly, I don't know if it's still true, but it used to be true, I think, of the French in general. And maybe we Americans tend to be a little more mathematical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although he was very strict with his students and other people who tried to perform his music, himself, the composer, was quite free.
Yes.
So I don't know how would maybe we could take him as an example, or maybe some. I know what we should do. We should try to do it as perfectly, right, and count out, subdivide this to the smallest values, but then later forget everything and play improvisation.
Yes.
That's like a compromise.
Exactly. And I don't know if this is disrespectful, but he may have had some limitations as a performer. Not all composers do. I think we imagine that Bach surely didn't have any limitations, right? But
he did. Remember he was, I think, one of his harpsichord friends, and on one occasion, he had this habit of jumping on the harpsichord and playing something, like sight reading a new collection of music on the harpsichord whenever he was visiting some friends. And on one time, he was like stumbling in one passage of one page 3 times. Actually, he had to go back and repeat and said out loud, and it was recorded like in the memoir of some student, that no, it's not possible to sight read everything perfectly, even for Bach. That's true.
I have not heard that story. That's great. What is the source?
Well, I think we can find the primary source materials in the Bach documents, the new Bach reader, I think.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that's a great book. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, Kathleen, we have talked about Nazard, about Messiaen. So, what happened later, right? How did you choose this profession as an organist? What motivated you to this path later?
Purely love of the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the instrument. I think more than the literature. So I love the harpsichord literature, but I love the colors of the organ.
Right. And probably as a student, we all have like people whom we look up to, mentors, right? Did you have any mentors back then?
Yes, I would just mention all my teachers. So at New England Conservatory, I studied with Frank Taylor. I also, at times when I was enrolled as a harpsichordist, had some private lessons with Lois Regestein. And then I did my doctorate with Cherry Rhodes.
Wonderful. So I think these people had some influence on you, right?
Yes.
who you are as a person, a human being, and even performer today.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. We need those mentors, teachers, and their guidance is invaluable, I think, in every stage of our lives.
Yes, their guidance and their example.
True. And it's great if they are performers too, right? Sometimes teachers might get stuck in teaching mode and sometimes hesitate perform themselves. But if they are performers, so it's even better, don't you think?
Yes.
Yes. Wonderful. So, Kathleen, when you look at your current situation as a performer, you probably have some angles that you want to play more, some specific repertoire. Do you have your favorite repertoire today?
My favorite repertoire. I have very wide tastes.
No.
Maybe there's a little hole in the middle somewhere with some of the 19th century music, but I play a lot of very early music. I've had quite a few performances recently of the large Eben Labyrinth cycle.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Did you hear composer himself perform this cycle?
Yes.
I did too. Improvised, right?
Yes. Yes,
Wonderful.
and then there is then I think after he wrote it down, he stuck to his composition. So I do also have a recording of him playing the published version.
I've heard, I think, several performances of this work himself, Peter Eben, and also I think it was in one of the Heroi festivals, some in Eastman School of Music. I think Johannes Lundgren, or Landgren, played this cycle with the narrator, but that was like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's time marches on, and new works don't remain new forever. But it's still contemporary. I would still call it contemporary, even though he's no longer with us.
Right. So, Kathleen, have you performed the cycle already, or are you working on it currently?
Oh, yes. I always have a narrator. We did do one somewhat abbreviated performance where there wasn't really time to do all the movements, and the narrator only spoke maybe the first and last narration, but everyone had the text to read.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting text as well. People really are able to follow and appreciate it.
Would you say that the meaning of the text is depicted in music too?
Definitely, yes. Yes, it definitely is, I think. And we have some interesting connections with Pennsylvania and Comenius even, and some of the Moravians that came to this part of the world very early on. So there is even a statue of Comenius in the center of the town of Bethlehem. It's so this is interesting for people as well. They may not, some people surprisingly know more about him than you would expect Americans to, and then others maybe have never heard of him but are fascinated by the connection as well as by the content of the text. But we have traveled with this piece a bit too. But since I'm here in Pennsylvania, I thought that was interesting to point out.
Exactly. It's worth mentioning and recommending for people to look into the text as well. Because if you just listen to the music, it's fascinating, right?
Yes.
The polymodal, polytonal writing.
Yes.
Writing it's okay. It's fascinating.
Yes.
But when you combine it with the text, it's even more powerful.
It is. Mm-hmm. And I think that I think he depicts it really so well. And the ultimate proof for me was that when I was first learning it, I had a dog, a greyhound, who I felt was really reacting to it. And she hated when I had to practice horror and swooning. She hated that movement, and she would leave the room. And it was clear that her favorite movement was the wedding movement. And I could just begin a few chords and she would be right by my side. So I think he really found a universal expression, if even a greyhound can understand the emotions.
It just reminds me your remark about this particular dog experience. Osha and I, my wife and I, were practicing some Beethoven's adagio for four hands, for mechanical clock, and we played duet together, and we were practicing it on the piano, on the rusty old piano, which was untuned for decades probably. So we got our dog together, and you see, she came from behind us and wanted to join in playing too. Yeah.
Yes, they have good ears.
Yeah. And sometimes they start to howl, right? To sing
right.
together. Wonderful. So, Kathleen, what specifically fascinates you about the style of Eben? Do you know? Can you point out?
I think that, I used to travel to the Czech Republic very frequently. And so I play a number of the Czech composers. I think I maybe perhaps play more, for example, Ropek, and feel a strong affinity in general there. But I do think that the Labyrinth particularly is really a masterwork. And yes.
Have you played 4 biblical dances by Eben?
I have not. I'm familiar with them, but I have not played them. But yes, sometimes he's very good at these descriptive musical descriptions, and yes.
It's audience very friendly, and even Laudes, the great cycle of Laudes, even though technically it's very challenging, people in the audience really have great time listening to this. Right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Laudes probably was one of the trickiest pieces I ever played from my entire repertoire, I would say, by Eben, because of rhythmical.
I can believe that. Yes. And I find myself nodding, and of course I need to speak out loud.
Great.
But I agree with you.
So, Kathleen, now probably a great year is starting for you, right? The September and the new fall, new beginnings. Do you have something other challenges that are coming up to you? Are you currently working on some concert and premieres today?
Yes, my next few concerts are with harpsichord and chamber music, but I'm learning some trumpet and organ repertoire. I have some programs coming up with the trumpeter that I work with at my church job, and so we have done some interesting things with small organ, and we have some opportunities to play with larger organs. And of course, I think larger organs, of course, balance better with a trumpet. But sometimes it's an interesting challenge. I think we found more fascinating repertoire when we were working with the very small organ and had to work around those limitations. So we have learned some very, very interesting pieces. One of my favorites is just, we were not able to play the whole suite with the small organ, but there is a movement. In fact, I can't even remember what collection it's from because we weren't able to explore it all. But there's a movement by Daniel Pinkham for only organ pedals and trumpet, and that was great fun.
You know, some organists sometimes hesitate to play with soloists, either wind players or string players, because sometimes people say, oh, I want to be a virtuoso solo performer, right? And I would not play with, let's say, another virtuoso performer because he or she will steal the show, right? How do you feel about this today?
Oh, I don't worry about that at all. I really enjoy chamber music, and I've usually played with wind players. I also have a flute partner that I had played with for really decades. And of course, when you're playing with a wind player, whatever it is, but probably especially trumpet, they really do need to rest. And so there's room for your solo repertoire on the program. You're never completely cut out.
No, because and for the listeners, it's
exactly.
better.
And I think that wind instruments are great with organ because the organ is also a wind instrument. It just gives it a little more life. But I think that these combinations for me are very interesting. As much as I love strings, maybe with organ, I think it seems natural to pair with winds.
Mm-hmm. Especially brass, I would say.
Yes.
Because these reeds, you can have a dialogue between trumpet and reed of the organ stop.
Yes. Yes.
Or trombone. Have you played, by the way, Windows after Marc Chagall by Peter Eben?
We have not, because we have not played on a big enough organ, but we have the score. We've been hoarding the score. And so, yes. And so our biggest challenge for this season is that there's so much interesting, more contemporary repertoire that we have to limit our choices so as not to completely assault the audience with all, dissonant repertory.
Leave it for the future, right? The next season.
Exactly. Yes.
You're absolutely right, Kathleen, because people can collaborate as yourself with other instruments and let's say in your case trumpet, and this collaboration is very artistically pleasing. And if you treat it as a maybe artistically not very intricate repertoire forming, and you only play Ave Maria and Canis Angelicus, then it's not interesting, right? For yourself and for the audience. But if you dig up some old repertoire that has been neglected, or maybe you find new scores or even commission new pieces, then something magical can happen, right? And you like remembered and associated with this duet.
Yes.
It becomes part of your brand.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I wish you all the best and success in artistic collaboration with other people, and I think your audience will only enjoy it a lot, these combinations.
Yes, and it helps to build audience, because you may be drawing not only organ aficionados, but people that are following these other instruments, or perhaps the friends and family of both performers.
Well, exactly. Have you played with percussion player yet?
Only a little bit, and that's great fun. Yeah, and it's fun with it's fun with trumpet. We have included some percussion with some of our trumpet programs, so it can work for maybe Renaissance dances and things of that sort, but then also some more contemporary music.
I can only recommend Landscapes of Patmos if you have a good percussionist by Peter Eben.
Yes.
That's an amazing cycle, and absolutely amazing and colorful for the audience. Yeah.
Yes.
And both performers are equally important there, and equally busy playing artistic, challenging music.
Yes, and it's a good contrast to the organ, because that is the one sound that we don't have. The speech is less percussive than other keyboards, but at the same time, percussion can stand up to the power and volume of the organ.
Mm-hmm. So, Kathleen, I've heard people say about organists that our normal career choices, regular career choices, must be in three directions. We have to perform as concert organists, either solo or in other chamber ensembles, and then we have to be liturgical musicians too, and also teachers, right? Teachers of students. Would you agree that in your case this trifold path is also very prominent?
Yes, I end up doing everything. I also compose. So this is me personally, though. I think I have a lot of interests. So I think if someone is happier being more focused within the organ world, that's also possible.
Do you compose, let's say, out of passion, or you have a necessity? Let's say you maybe have a concert coming up and have a slot for a new repertoire piece that you are thinking about, and then you write it down.
I don't always, by any means, include my pieces on my performances. But lately I've had a reasonably steady stream of commissions. And I do know that sometimes people are interested to hear a performer's compositions, but there's also so much other music I want to play.
True. sometimes you have to do like everything, combinations of various repertoire, and maybe play your own piece in the middle of other fascinating repertoire, right?
Yes.
Would you say, Kathleen, that organists should not neglect composition and should not be afraid of composition too, and try their hands of writing down musical ideas of their own?
Yes. I think probably we are all composers, and it just depends on what people's interests are, I guess. Or I'm sure we all feel that we're expressing ourselves through performing other people's music as well. There are many means of expression.
Mm-hmm. Have you written compositions for other instruments or ensembles other than organ?
I'm working on a commission for guitar quartet right now. So yeah, I have done some other instruments and combinations.
Right. It's. I think if organists would write only for the organ, then they would remain primarily organ composers, right? But if you write like a little bit of everything, then you break up into the general music sphere, right?
Yes, but certainly organ is specialized enough that it's reasonable that so many of our organ composers are a little bit specialized, or that so many composers for the organ also play.
Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, people should not be afraid of composing, and if they even have passion for other music, like other instruments and even vocal music or music, why don't they try, right, and get better at this craft, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, Kathleen, talking about becoming a better organist, do you say that your composition efforts and processes have helped you to become a better organist today?
That's a very interesting question. But I think only any experience can help you to become a better organist. Mm-hmm. It certainly doesn't hurt. You know, I have never felt that it's taking time away from my practice or anything like that.
You would probably agree with me because I also notice a similar thing. Composing helped me to read challenging music better and to understand how the piece is put together much more easily.
Yes.
Then because we then look at new scores not as performers but maybe as composers, right?
Exactly.
To decipher the musical code and story.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, Kathleen, talking about becoming a better organist, what is number one thing that you would think would be helpful for people to do in order to become a better organist today? What would they? How would they start? What's number first step?
So you are assuming they already play and want to become better.
Better. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think that that listening is so important, not becoming only stuck in the organ world, but hearing all kinds of great music and performers, and also being able to watch great performers. So there's a trend to, video project the organ player these days, right? Because we're so often in the loft. And as a performer, it can be nerve-wracking to have a camera on your hands. But I think for other organists, and it can even be distracting as an audience member, but at the same time, there's no doubt that you can learn by watching a great technician, right?
Right.
It's a great opportunity that we probably didn't have in just a few decades past.
Right. And as you say, not being stuck in the organ world, but basically being curious about what's happening in other spheres, in other instruments, and even outside musical world, right? You can
Yes.
learn everywhere.
Yes. Read Comenius, right?
Exactly. Comenius is a great pedagogue, and that's why European Union, has the Comenius program for teachers today.
Yes.
Good. Like Erasmus program for students, exchange student program. So Comenius is for, I think, for exchange program for teachers in EU. I
Yes.
Wonderful. What would be step number 2, Kathleen?
I'm sorry?
What would be step number 2 to become?
Step number 2, after we've heard all this great music. Well, we do have to put it into practice. There's no substitute for just sitting down at the instrument and doing focused practice. And I think we all struggle to find the practice time, but we can mostly all benefit from more.
Well, exactly, because if you take great examples from other cultures, other worlds, other instruments, and not apply into practice, it's just a waste of time, right?
Right.
Excuse me. So yeah, definitely, whatever we learn, we have to practice and integrate and internalize.
Yes.
With repetition, multiple repetition. And probably after that would be number 3, right? Step number 3. I'm very curious about that.
Step number 3. Well, I guess you have to try it out in the world, don't you? Yes. Play for others.
Mm-hmm. Because if you're stuck in your practice room, then you might feel great about your practice and your pieces and your repertoire, but you don't know how you are really playing unless you're playing for others, right?
Right, and your playing may not be the same, right? It's a little different experience playing for others, whether it's your family or your church congregation or a huge audience. Any additional bodies that are listening can change your experience. So there's a level on which we have to all play for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But that experience will be a little bit different.
And of course, when you play for others, the experience is much different, and you feel like somebody's watching you, right? And you're maybe feel stressed out, right?
Yes.
How do you overcome this challenge of being this basically performance anxiety? Do you have any performance anxieties of yourself?
Well, yeah, I think we all have something, whether it's anxiety or if concentration is not what you want it to be. I mean, ideally, it's a good thing to have the little extra edge or excitement that an audience can give you. And it's just finding that balance, being able to appreciate the edge of live performance, but not letting it overwhelm. So I do think experience and preparation are helpful. And that's the slow answer, isn't it?
You can't really overcome this anxiety overnight, right? You have to get out there and practice and play for others many times, maybe 10,
yes.
maybe 50 times. And only then you become a little bit more secure and more relaxed. But probably this fear will never go away completely.
Right. And it is so helpful to have repeat performances, right? And sometimes that's a luxury that we can't all enjoy, but that's when you really absorb a piece and the experience of playing it.
Well, you're right, Kathleen, because it's very practical. You learn like 1 hour of organ music per year, and you travel the world in different places and play this repertoire, right? Maybe you adjust the different instruments a little bit, right? Adjust a piece here and there. But it could be done. And you feel much more secure and at ease at the beginning of your tour than at the end of the tour.
Right.
Although at the beginning would be also very exhilarating too, because it's new, fresh, and exciting.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. But I think if one is bored by one's own performances, then maybe you're in the wrong field. I think not too many of us feel that way.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for these interesting and inspirational thoughts today. We discuss the intricate and fascinating Nazard stops, Messiaen Ascension Suite, and Peter Eben's styles and labyrinths and all kinds of chamber music that you are fascinated with, and also your advice, 3-step advice into becoming a better organist, which is, of course, listening to other music and putting it all into practice. And remember to play for others. Thank you so much, Kathleen. You are wonderful.
Thank you. It was very nice to meet you this way.
And before we end, Kathleen, would you be able to give us a link where people could find you online, maybe your website, your social media profile, YouTube channel, anything that people could click and...
Yes, absolutely. My website is my name, KathleenScheide.com. And people will see it spelled out as they look up the podcast, correct? So it's KathleenScheide.com.
Wonderful. I'll put it into the description of this conversation, and people could click and visit you online and say hello and thanks.
Excellent.
That you won't believe, sometimes people from distant and farthest places of the world will say hello to you, because some thoughts that you said today will resonate with somebody. Not everything maybe, but they will pick up some little tidbits of inspiration and will say hello to you. Not necessarily this week, but years and decades from now too.
I love that. That's wonderful.
Yes, wonderful. So please, our listeners, visit KathleenScheide.com and get to know our guest much better. And of course, Kathleen is active as a performer, and you will hear a lot of beautiful organ music there too. And you will find out much more in greater detail about Kathleen and what she does and what she is up to in the future.
Thank you so much for the interview.
All Right. Thank you, Kathleen, and good luck in your travels, in your premieres, in your collaboration with the trumpet and other instruments. Enjoy curiosity that you have into other spheres, and let's stay in touch.
And good luck with all your other podcasts.
Thank you. If you liked this conversation, I encourage you to visit my blog, Secrets of Organ Playing, at organduo.lt, where you will find lots of insights, practical advice, and training for every area of organ playing. You can subscribe to this blog for free to get your daily dose of inspiration and to be the first to know when any of my future podcasts roll out. I hope to help you reach your dreams in organ playing. I'm Vidas Pinkevičius. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you online really soon.